Okay, well, let's get started. Happy Thursday to everybody in the community. For you that may be new to Execs In The Know, my name's Chad McDaniel, co-founder, president of Execs In The Know, a great corporate CX sharing community that has really been a passion of ours for the last 15 years. Hey, I know how busy we all are. Thank you for your time. I'm thinking of all of our community members. We've got some really great talent that is on today's webinar that I've seen register. So thank you. And I'm going to really ask for your help towards the end to give comments and questions and thoughts about today's topic. So for the webinar today, we named this How Generative AI, Gig, and Traditional Support Are Shaping the Future of the Call Center. And why this is important, I mean, outside of the obvious as a team here, it's really not in the distant future stuff. It's quantum leap forward that we're living today and how we are going to see, I think, various changes over the next few years. And also, I think at scale, how we can maybe do things like we've never been able to do before. So the conversation is going to be rich, it's timely, it's needed. This is not going to be, Sid, a one and done conversation. We're going to have a number of conversations around this over the next few months and foreseeable few years. But I'm excited for today's conversation. And Sid, I'll introduce you here shortly, but I know you've done a lot of preparation to share your thoughts and case studies for today's conversation. So let's go ahead and lean in. For today's schedule, typical webinar, we're all familiar with it. We're going to go through a presentation, got some case study stuff. I'm going to ask for your questions and comments at the end. There is a attendee chat box. So please put your comments in there. Really encourage that. We learn together as a group. So important I hear from you and get your thoughts and comments from today's conversation if you'll help us out on there. A lot of you know who Execs In The Know is. We are a very large corporate CX sharing community we call Leaders Learning from Leaders. Really a playbook for our CX leaders out there. We do a lot around content, research, topic gatherings such as these today, live meetings and gatherings, but there's so many ways to get plugged in. Just go to execsintheknow.com, go to our events website, go to our knowledge center. There's some tremendous information there that you can download, all the research and reports that we're putting out there. As always, a quick shout out to our corporate board. These are industry leaders that really are passionate about paying it forward, helping our industry thrive, helping future leaders within our industry. I can't say thank you enough to our corporate advisory board that helps put some of these things like today together, and also just their general advocacy for our industry. One of the best things, I just got a couple more slides, but one of the best things I would say to our community, join our private online community called Know It All. Know It All is a corporate, private-only community. It's like a mini LinkedIn and steroids, but there's tons of great conversations and questions that are being asked from hundreds of other corporate members in our community across the globe. Absolutely free to join. Just reach out if you need to myself, Chad at execsintheknow.com, or go online. And we look forward to you joining our private online community called Know It All. Last slide is, Sid, before I turn to you, but I'm always so excited when we get together for our live event. We're going to be at our national summit called the Customer Response Summit. We're going to be in Nashville, September 2022. Really want to extend a reach out to our entire community. Come out to this. It's always fun to be together. It's very, very informative. It's real conversations, real people. And if you've never been to one of our leadership gatherings, you've got to come. They're very meaningful, and everybody walks away with something, I promise you there. And Nashville, not a bad place to come in September. All right. Sid, let's dive in, because I think of today, the conversation, and I know you have put together a bit of a slide deck and presentation. Thank you. And I know in a webinar format, it's kind of one to many, so we'll let you get through the presentation. Sid, I think for the audience that may not be familiar with Movate, maybe a quick just introduction of the company. I know you've got a very specific line area of business within Movate. You could tell us a little bit about that, about what your focus is, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Absolutely, Chad. Thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to read. Movate used to be known as CSS Corp. We're a digital customer experience focused organization, right? We work across the board, across a number of different verticals, providing innovative, intuitive support solutions for a whole host of our customers across their entire life cycle. I've been in the company myself for the last 20 years, started off on the operations side of the fence, actually as an agent answering phone calls, have worn every conceivable hat on the operations side of the fence. And in my current role, I lead solutions, sales, and customer success for our digital customer experience portfolio of clients.
Well, 20 years, how fast time flies. Date myself a little bit. I had started in the industry as an agent in the 80s. So it's been a long, endearing time over these years, but great to see and a great time to be part of this community or this industry with some of the conversation we're going to be having. So Sid, welcome. Thank you for the advocacy of our industry. Thank you for the support of our community. Thank you for coming out and visiting with us and sharing with us some thought leadership. So let's jump right in. Audience, thank you. Please give your questions and comments in the chat box as we go through this, and we'll come back to that towards the end.
Perfect. Thank you, Chad. Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. I'm really looking forward to today's session. It's one of those great topics that is on everyone's heart and mind. And a topic that I'm actually personally very excited about, not just because it's a great topic of conversation, but because for what it means for the transformation and how we support customers. So it's really going to be evolutionary from what it does for our industry, from fixed to fluid, right? So without any further delay, let me just jump into the content I had prepared for us today. So our topic really covers where the contact center is headed. But before we go into what the future holds and where it's actually headed, let's take a quick look at what the current call center industry looks like for a minute, right? The saying that if it ain't broke, don't fix it really isn't great for a constantly evolving dichotomy where customer expectations or experience is constantly battling with the need to manage costs. I'm sure none of us have a blank check to go deliver the great experiences we know that we want to, and we know that our customers deserve. Now, call centers have really come a long way over the last decade or so, but the reality is that there are still some inherent inflexibilities with the way the call centers are built, right? We've just gotten better at learning to work within those limitations and with those limitations. For example, we do our best to plan ahead and forecast based on a limited set of variables that we have at our disposal, some amount of data, what the future potentially could look like. We also plan and prepare at the start of the year for what a back to school or holiday season is going to look like. We ramp then months in advance to make sure there's adequate lead time for hiring, for training, and to make sure that our agents get comfortable with the contacts that we anticipate and hope they'll actually get. Right? But what happens when marketing suddenly thinks up of creative ways to drive more potential sales, and in turn is going to result in more volumes into the contact center? So many of us have been in those heated, rapid planning and reorganization sessions. Or what happens when there's a change in the type of contacts that we were intending on getting? Or let's say, God forbid, something goes down or breaks during your highest volume season. I've actually had a customer's entire e-commerce platform go down on their biggest day, biggest shopping day of the year, because it just couldn't handle the load. So while the increased sales was a great thing to have, the problem just surfaced, inundated the call center with volumes, and hurt everybody, right? When all these dynamic changes happen, all our historical patterns, trends, forecasting, planning are now out of the window. We're all scrambling to do the best we can to meet service levels, the abandon rates, still manage our CSAT targets, our NPS targets. In some cases, we've had to shut down channels. And almost always, right, the end result is a burned out agent and call center staff. Now, granted, automation has really come a long way and has certainly helped take the edge off some of this. COVID also really helped accelerate some of the plans that we've been sitting on for a while and helped kind of leapfrog a little bit into adopting those digital transformation journeys. But the question to ask ourselves is, does it actually do enough? Has it achieved what we anticipated it would? Does it truly elevate the experience for our customers? And if it does it do it across all our touch points? Is the experience seamless for our customers? And break it down to the most fundamental question, right? Do our customers actually enjoy using our automated touch points? And all of this to say, without inclusion of all the cost we had to put in to deploy these solutions, the time, the energy, and the effort, and intending on seeing did it truly accomplish the return on investments we were either guaranteed or were hoping for at the start of this journey. So it's for those reasons and some more that you see on my screen is why I feel that the call center of today still operates in a model with a limited amount of flexibility. Don't get me wrong, I'm still a huge fan of the call center. Hey, like I just said, I've built 20 years of my livelihood around it. And it's not all doom and gloom. The thought here, and what I want to dive deeper into in this webinar, is how do we take the best of what's working with the call center, like the highly skilled labor force, our ability to provide a more personalized, high-touch, white glove type experience, amplify it with technology, and turn it into something that's great for customers and rewarding for the agents who support them. Think about examples like, what if airlines could scale up and down without straining their contact centers when there's unplanned inclement weather somewhere? What if a gaming company could handle surges when they launch new games without increasing their headcount, training timelines, fixed costs? What if retailers could tackle holiday surges without necessitating a ramp that lasts 3 to 4 months? What if automation can be more intuitive? What if it can be more human-like? That's the thought that I want to dive further into on today's webinar, right? So what's changing? What is it that can really outpace the decades of evolution we've had? What is that quantum leap Chad talked about that's going to get us into that call center of the future? Here's the answer, right? The two disruptive forces that are going to completely change the paradigm of how call centers operate are generative AI and the gig economy. I know not much of a big reveal. It was in the title. Chad set it up well before we started. But let's just peel back these two things a little further before I talk about where it's taking us as an industry. So first and foremost, generative AI's ability to leverage large language models and learn rapidly from either unsupervised or semi-supervised training has really catapulted what automation can do for a whole host of industries, including the call center. There isn't a single customer I've spoken to in the last 3 to 6 months that is not at the very least cautiously curious about what ChatGPT or Bard can do for them. Now, the second force is harnessing the power of the gig economy to provide a more flexible, scalable, and high-quality labor. Please note, I didn't say access to lower cost labor, because while gig workforce can actually lower your overall cost, it truly does expand out access into higher quality, higher skilled labor that will peel back a few slides down, right? And all of this can come together to still deliver incredibly great experiences to your customers. Now, the gig workforce in and itself isn't new. It's been around for a while in different variations. But what's now changing also is that combining the power of the gig workforce with intelligence generative AI brings to the table is really helping usher into prime time, making it relevant across more industries, making it relevant across more contact types, more intents that we can handle, and across channels that we probably don't leverage for support today, right? So those are the two disrupting forces and ecosystems. And let me dive into them just a little bit deeper, one at a time. So we'll start with generative AI, and let me peel back the layers here a little bit. And don't get me wrong, this is by no means intended to be a do-all, end-all list. Just think of it more as a representative sample of where it can be most impactful and where we're having most conversations with our customers. In discussion with various industry leaders and peers like yourselves, across a lot of different industry verticals and domains, I hear different ranges, right? Anywhere from 30% all the way up to 70% on what generative AI can handle on the front end, anywhere between 10, 40, 50% improvements based on where you are with your journey on how it can help with productivity on the back end and help elevate agent experience, right? So the first two are more back-end agent assist solutions. They can help amplify agent ability and, in my opinion, do 5 key things, right? First and foremost, and I think most importantly, it gives the agent the ability to focus on the customer without any other distraction or the need to multitask. They're not tool switching, they're not capturing notes, they're not having to access different systems to help the customer. They're just giving the customer their undivided attention, listening, assisting, and helping them, right? The second, it helps the agents be more intelligent and intuitive through the entire conversation because AI is actually giving them the next best action that they need to do or conduct. And that action is actually changing, evolving based on the real-time conversation. It can even do so much as detect like minor influxes in tone or language used to change the path it's taking to make the conversation more meaningful and relevant to the customer. So it's not traditionally what we've seen as fixed, scripted troubleshooting trees, just in the form of a next best action. Right? 3, because there's so much intelligence being fed up to the agent in real time, it also helps them handle more complex interactions more easily, meaning less training, less onboarding time, and a lower time taken to hit proficiency levels that in the past would take 30, 60, 90 days. Right? 4, very, very simply, it just drives and delivers a better experience and interaction quality for the customer. And 5, what I feel is an outcome of collectively the first 4, is that it creates a better agent or employee experience in the back end and creates a much higher degree of job satisfaction. The second 2 that you see on the slide are where I believe we're going to see generative AI be more pervasive straight out of the gate. Its ability to be woven into the existing channels of communication, create rapidly scalable interactions across new channels, like I mentioned, with more knowledgeable, articulate, conversational, human-type responses is where most of my customers are focused today. And I know I hear all the time about the pros and cons of generative AI, but let me just assure you that the pros significantly eclipse the cons when it's done and deployed correctly. And I agree, there needs to be guardrails, there needs to be authentication, governance, etc. But going into all of that, all of what it'll take to make generative AI successful will be too much to unpack on just this webinar. And frankly, some of it is still evolving. So we don't really have all of the answers just yet. And also, some of it is very specific to what each industry or enterprise is looking to solve. Right? The other notable trend that we're seeing that's very important, I'd say, is that originally, what we thought when we thought about front-end automation and leveraging generative AI, we really assumed it would create a greater disruption in the lower skilled, less complex type responses, right? You know, the 20% of contacts that drive 80% of your volume, the low-hanging fruit, etc. However, what we're starting to see is that generative AI is becoming more inclusive, more relevant for higher tier, more complex interactions, and provides a much greater impact there just straight out of the gate. Right? Now, the last one you see here is to help create more actionable insights from the myriad of data sources where our customers are telling us what they like about us, what they don't like about us, what they want to see improve, and why they want to see it improved, right? So the ability to have this sort of an integrated view from across all touch point, physical and virtual, are going to help organizations drive very meaningful change to how we develop products and services, how we engage and interact with customers, how we market our products and services to them, and how we eventually evolve to a place where we're able to preempt and get in front of what their needs are. And this isn't, Alexa is listening to me and now I see an ad for a plunger when I log into my Prime account. It's truly getting to a more meaningful place of engagement with our customers based on what their actual preferences are.
Sid, can I just, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I'll just go back to that previous slide that you were on. And let me ask the community, because we are a learning community together, and Sid raised a number of interesting, I guess, discussion points here, and thank you for the slide here too. I'd be curious though, no matter what side of the fence you're on, supplier side, corporate side, developer side, whatever it is, what is your reaction? What do you agree? What do you disagree? Do you have a different viewpoint or lens to it? And other suggestions. Again, we learn together as a community, so feel free in the chat box to just put your commentary, what your thoughts are, how you see it. We got some great mind share on this call today. So if you'll help out on that would be great. But Sid, I appreciate you putting that forward. I know we got some case studies we're going to go to and other things, but it is thought-provoking.
Thank you, Chad. And I'm glad it is, right? Because a lot of these things, I'll also tie some of the dots on when I talk about this type of intelligence and front end and back end automation, how it ties into the real-time case study, so live example of how we're leveraging this in more practical terms. So the goal isn't for the exercise to be simply theoretical and for us to talk about concepts and where it's going, but it's to be able to peel back and really understand and dive into the practicality of the implementation and what it can do. So with that, let me just quickly switch over to the next slide. All right, the next disrupting force really is the gig economy, right? It's not a new concept by any means. It's existed for decades and beyond now in various shapes and forms. However, I think Airbnb and Uber really made gig more mainstream first in the US and then now across the entire globe around 2008, 2009. And it really created a new way of thinking about how we can both service our needs, service others' needs, and be served ourselves. Right? So in its current kind of evolutionary phase, gig is actually being leveraged for significantly more complex and highly skilled tasks, whether it's from examples like a knowledge marketplace where you go and source specific, very intricate skilled labor, or finding people to work on piecemeal tasks that collectively become a large, greater whole output, or an expert-focused peer-to-peer community support type model for a more authentic and empathetic level of support and engagement, or even in a train and deploy type solution for bite-sized or single work stream type tasks, right? The possibilities of what the gig workforce can be leveraged for are truly just scratching the surface at this time. And the stats you see here, in my opinion, are a conservative reflection of the growth of this workforce, especially if you now take it and combine it with the power of generative AI. But I want to draw your attention to two things on this slide that were actually, I found most interesting, right? One is that gig workers are 60% more likely to keep upskilling themselves on their own to stay relevant. So it's just the community and the individuals constantly elevating the level of knowledge that they have and possess. And secondly, they can continue to earn more even in an inflationary type economy and still cost lower and cheaper to organizations to be able to deploy and scale. Right? So I think those were very intriguing to me as we went through a lot of this research and background, understanding where gig is heading. Now, with that, where does this all kind of take us, right? What does this mean for the call center, and how are we moving to this more fluid model? So the accelerated impact that these two forces are actually having is really helping us usher in what I think of as the new avatar of the call center that really takes everything we love about it in its current form, combines it with intelligence and rapid AI powered learning, the likes of which we've never seen before, leverages the power of gig workforce at scale, which we've actually never considered before, to create a more fluid contact center of the future that's focused on experience, both for the customer and for the agent, is focused on being flexible and agile based on demand. And this is both predictable demand that we know is going to occur every year and unpredictable demand for those unexpected situations that happen all the time. The flexibility of the workforce is there when you need it and truly gone when you don't. And lastly, it's focused on outcomes like resolution that matters to both customers and enterprises alike. And that is where we believe the future of the call center is headed. And like Chad said, mind you, I didn't say distant future, right? I truly do believe that the future is here. It's now, and it's more relevant than it's ever been before. Now, what I have here on the next slide is really a simplistic representation of how we believe this is going to translate down to the brass tacks and how the contacts and contact center environment is going to flow into the future, right? So if you look at the left of my chart here, you start out like you would in any typical contact center environment today, where your traditional agents are handling about 70% of the overall volume. Automation is handling about 20%, and let's assume some of it is a spotty experience here in some cases. And then gig is handling out of the gate about 5 to 10%, right? But you take this piece by piece over time and you kind of evolve it where you get this almost inverted pyramid of how contacts get handled, where your agents are handling only 5 to 10% of the most complex or intimate types of interactions. So a very elite, higher tier, higher degree of support. Gig is handling a greater sense of volume, anywhere between 20 to 30% of the interactions. And the AI enabled solutions that you deploy across different channels are conversationally and in a very human like manner, managing all the way up to 70% of the volumes. Right? And you see here, this is a whole journey that's evolving over time. And I intentionally left out an indicative timeline at the bottom because a timeline that works for company A might be too fast or too slow for a company B based on where they are in their journey. But that's exactly what it is it's a journey. And the two key components that we're actually leveraging to help customers both on the journey of transformation, but also help accelerate their transformation are things I've noted on the slide. One is a transformation hub for gig, right? And think of both these components as pieces that sit outside of the call center, but are still intricately involved in what happens with each contact within the call center, right? So the transformation hub for gig, their goal then becomes very simply review hiring profiles as they consistently change for what we need to bring into our call center, review training content that our agents go through, review tools, review processes, review interdependencies between them, review systems, access restrictions, so on and so forth, with the singular focus on how do we take more out of what's historically been handled by a traditional agent and then move them over to a gig workforce. The second is a digital adoption accelerator team and framework. They do need to kind of coexist to continually look at all of the interactions and workflows from end to end and identify what it will take for generative AI or automation to manage them more autonomously or semi-autonomously. Right? And so when these two work cohesively together, but as standalone accelerators, it helps the customer journey to be very frictionless, personalized, and very efficient, and helps enterprises be able to accomplish their customer experience goals both in the short and the long terms. Right? Moving forward, I apologize for this being so cluttered and an eye chart, right? But let me just try to simplify what we're trying to depict here. All we're trying to showcase is the various points of integration, both on the front end and the back end, that are essential and necessary to ensure that the customer experience and journey is prioritized. And you have all of these enablers working together to drive that better customer experience. I tell customers all the time when we solution for them, right? When you drive transformation with a very myopic focus on driving a better experience, everything else you expect from it, like efficiency, cost reduction, ROI, increase in lifetime value, so on and so forth, they're all natural byproducts that will fall in place when the strategy is executed correctly. The alternate approach really could have devastating and sometimes irreversible impact on your customers. Now, Movate as an organization is very uniquely positioned to deliver all of these three in a very cohesive and seamless manner because we leverage Movate Edison that's powered now by generative AI to help drive the self-support framework. Our support services delivery center of excellence with over 12,000 employees can help deliver that elite, high touch, and high complexity work. And lastly, our acquisition of Directly's On Demand about a year ago helps kind of seamlessly integrate these two into our over 7,000 and growing gig workforce. Right. This also gets combined with Movate Labs that helps deliver on that digital adoption accelerator and gig transformation hub that I talked about, and helps us tie all of them together and marry them to the outcomes that matter to our customers. Next, I'm sure a lot of you, almost everybody, is inquisitive to some degree or the other, which is why you joined the webinar today. But for those of you that are still on the fence, where thinking about if this fluid call center is right for you, is it right for your customers, is it right for the types of contacts that you get, here are a few top reasons, I believe, for why you should consider it more seriously. First, generative AI can absolutely help deliver a more personalized, more contextual, and conversational level of support on the front end, and help elevate and amplify agents' ability at the back end at a scale like we've never seen before. And it also has the ability to constantly improve and evolve fairly rapidly compared to what we've seen in traditional automation-based solutions. Second is you'll be able to drive and tie solutions to the outcomes that matter to you, and more importantly, to your customers. Third is you'll create a more intelligence-based ecosystem, whether it's delivered through gig automation or a traditional contact center, that provides a more rewarding experience to your agents and employees on the back end. You'll have the rapid scalability we all know we need for when you need it and for what you need it, and it's not there when you don't. 5, if you're able to work in a peer-based expert model, depending on what needs to be supported, this type of scalability comes with virtually no lag time while you wait for experts to be hired, trained, and then finally hit a proficiency level that's conversant. And they can provide a higher degree, rather, of support from a more user perspective that's very authentic and empathetic. You also get to reserve the best and brightest from your call center to solve more intimate and complex interactions and have them where customers actually need them the most. And lastly, with the right partner, you'll be able to pay by the outcomes that matter and create an ecosystem where you and the partner are equally vested in the same success criteria. Now, the next slide is where I think all of this, the rubber meets the road, everything we've set up in the previous slides, right? I want to discuss a use case from a client of ours. They're in the telecom industry, obviously confidential at this stage, but they've really partnered with us and jumped on board in creating this call center of the future, right? It's an evolutionary process. I talked about it being a journey. And while some of the pieces here are already implemented, some are still work in progress, some are evolving, and some are deep still in the discovery stage, which is why I'm calling it a use case instead of a case study. So what are we creating for them? A cohesive, holistic delivery model that includes all the three components we've discussed today through the presentation: the call center, the gig workforce, and the generative AI solution, each playing a very specific role in creating a great experience that's very synergistic with each other and outcome focused, right? Now, I'll start off with, I'll talk through kind of the key things that indicate how we're actually doing, and I'll spend a little bit of time here because it really helps create a more practical representation of everything I've spoken about so far. Now, you heard me say a few slides down about being able to bring in information from multiple sources and intelligence from multiple sources to drive better interactions. Where we're starting with this intelligence is to identify intent behind every contact. Sounds simple, sounds fairly straightforward, but what we are getting to evolve into is not just identifying what the stated need of the customer is, but also getting into non-stated intents and sub-intents that actually drive the primary stated or non-stated intent, right? Now, I'll give you an example of what we're doing here. So a customer, let's say in this use case, that's calling to cancel their service. Obviously, they want to cancel their service. But by leveraging data from multiple different, sometimes disparate sources, we can identify, or with a certain degree of certainty and intelligence, identify what their potential sub-intent could be, right? For example, if we're monitoring their service and we see they have had a lot of service disruptions, drop calls, text messages failing to go out, so on and so forth, we can fairly intuitively understand that that's potentially what's driving their need to cancel. Or let's say there's been missed bill payments, or they've had to call in asking for credits or delayed payments. We could assume that it's potentially because their bill is too high. Or let's say we know that they walked into a store, so now we're bridging the virtual and the physical. And let's say that we noted that they had a bad experience in the store, right? These are all potential sub-intents that we could gather from all the different sources, whether it's service data, store data, customer history with us, interactions with us, so on and so forth. Run all of this metadata through generative AI. We could potentially now integrate that with very strong routing algorithms that dovetails into which intent should go to which mode of support, right? So, for example, send the person with billing issues to a virtual assistant to kind of help negotiate maybe a better plan. And if virtual assistant for some reason isn't able to give the customer what they need, send them to Sally. And Sally, we know based on analysis of her persona and her profile, is really great at negotiation. She's really great at customer handling. And sending the contact to her, we can ensure she's going to deliver the best outcome for both the customer as well as for the company. Find whatever that happy medium is, right? We can route the customer that has service issues to a gig expert who's a little more technical, but also now arm that gig expert with generative AI telling him, hey, guess what? It's not that they're having an issue with these drop calls every single place they go. It's just in one area. Maybe it's their home or office. So troubleshoot. But remember, you can just offer the customer also a free range extender for their loyalty, put it where they're having weak service to help improve the service, right? Or if the customer's having drop calls and issues everywhere they go, maybe it's an issue with the handset. Given the customer's track history with us, offer them a free upgrade to the latest iPhone or Samsung device that's out there. And lastly, for the customer that had a bad store experience, send them straight to a more elite support expert, right? We can then provide a more white glove experience on the call, potentially undo any poor experience they had in the store. You don't really want to take that contact and route that type of an intent through an automated solution because they're just coming off of a bad experience. And then I talked about non-stated intent. Examples here could be, let's say, after we've saved the customer, we show them that we let them know they have a pending offer on their account they haven't cashed in on, or a rebate that they never claimed. Or say someone on their family plan is not even getting close to the data caps that they had signed up for. You could potentially lower their monthly rate proactively. Think of the incredible experience and the stickiness that would drive for that customer that originally, I'll remind you, started off with wanting to cancel, which in any way you slice it or dice it is a negative reason for intent. Right? So identifying that multi-layer intent becomes critical for the right routing strategy. And again, helps you ensure you stay focused on driving that better customer experience. The second thing is deflection strategies to contain via conversational AI on an IVR, deflect the messaging channels for the right intents, resolve through AI-enabled chatbots, virtual assistants, conversational AI, and if required, route them to either a gig workforce or a traditional agent based on that same nature of the intent, based on who the customer is, so on and so forth. The third item is building an agent or a gig expert experience where they have all of that intelligence driven to them to handle the contacts more effectively and efficiently. And get this, drive it to a point where they can do it without needing to touch their keyboard at all. This will give your agents the ability to have total focus on the customer and just provide a great experience. Because don't forget, as AI gets more intelligent, more human-like, if a customer reaches or has to actually be sent to an agent, they're now going to be expecting so much more out of that interaction than they traditionally ever have. The level of support we're providing today, no matter how great as measured by all of our metrics, simply isn't going to be enough. It's going to have to evolve and also, like the generative AI, leapfrog to that next level. Right? And lastly, we talked about digital adoption accelerator a bit, and we're doing it here as well for different parts of the journey. But we're also proposing a digital adoption accelerator program where you can test all the new tech, all the new innovation that's getting rolled out, iron out all of the kinks, whether it's in the tech itself, testing to make sure it's actually delivering the outcomes that we had intended, if not, identify why. And even things maybe as simple as how we're training our agents properly reflective of what we want them to do, right? So take out all the issues that we could potentially have before the tech or the tools get rolled out to thousands and thousands of experts worldwide, and then having to reel back and structure a solution becomes that much more complex. So what you'll see on the right from an outcome perspective is a TCO reduction of about 25% already. This is without the benefits of AI. Honestly, the full benefits of what that will look like with AI and at scale are still being evaluated. They're already seeing a lift in their CSAT scores and a significant lowering of agent effort and a considerable lowering of customer effort as well. Their staffing flexibility will continue to grow as we expand and have more intents be handled by gig. And honestly, with all the outcomes that we're seeing today, the client and us, we truly believe that we're just barely scratching the surface of what's possible. So that's the last slide I had, and hopefully that was able to tie a lot of the dots together to be able to provide how practically we're taking this call center of the future that's here and now and operationalizing it with different layers of intelligence and cohesively integrating the three components of the traditional contact center, the gig workforce, and overlaying and underlaying them with generative AI. And with that, Chad, I'll hand it over to you. Any thoughts, comments?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to great time to bring our audience back into the conversation as we wrap up here. And I got some specific questions for you. We've got a lot of questions or comments in the chat box. Thank you, and I'll make sure I get to those too. First thing I want to start out with what you said at the very beginning, and I think about this all the time as running a customer CX leadership community. Do our customers really enjoy our automated efforts? And it's fascinating. Do our customers really enjoy our automation efforts? And not to dissect from the entire conversation here, but where do you think we sit right now, Sid, as an industry in that question? And it's a pure guess, but what would be your thought?
I think, honestly, are they excited? Are they happy? Are they getting the experiences out of our automation solutions that they should be? I'd say the experience is spotty at best, Chad. I think we're really great at doing certain things on certain channels. I think customer behavior over time has changed and evolved to be able to accept some of those channels and responses. But is it truly a very cohesive human-like experience across multiple touch points, across multiple interactions? I think it's still evolving. Generative AI is certainly going to help with a lot of it, but I think just beyond generative AI is the strategy, planning, and the execution of how and where you want to deploy it.
So we've been talking about this whole concept fixed to fluid and between generative AI and looking at our staffing augmentation and everything else in between. And I'm of the opinion, Sid, that I don't necessarily say one size fits all or one is the absolute answer. I think there's a balance and there's a scorecard in all of this. And when I think of, if Tom Whelan, if you're still on the call, and Lisa Oswell and Kelly Cudworth and many others in our community that are listening today, if we were to have this same conversation in 3 to 5 years, this fixed to fluid and everything we've been talking about, where do you think we'd be on that continuing path? Do you see advancements? Do you see any issues, concerns, or if you want to put comments in there, I'd love to hear from you or others. But what I want to do, why people are taking a moment to kind of react, and again, Tom, Lisa, and Kelly, and others, please give me your thoughts because I respect everyone's opinion on this subject. Let me ask you this. If I think about kind of the three takeaways, the three main learnings from today's session, and always keeping our audience in mind, Sid, how would you say here are the three main things I want this session and our people to take away from today?
Great question, Chad. So I think, see, the first and foremost thing is, right, no matter where our community is on their journey, and what their opinions are on the pros and cons of what generative AI can do, um, we should all understand that it is here to stay. So if you're not looking into it or evaluating what it can do for you, you should at least start, right? I would actually encourage everybody to start playing with it in your day-to-day life, right? Bard now has a Chrome extension that sits right by your search engine, and so you're seeing intuitive responses there as well. Microsoft's already integrated ChatGPT's Copilot into Office to help improve productivity. So there are practical ways you can dip your toe in the water without necessitating you to jump in head first, right? I'd say that's the first thing. The second is, and this is what I feel is probably the most important, is focus your transformation journey and plan it with the customer at the forefront. And I know with this, with our community, with the people here that are represented, it sounds like I'm preaching to the choir. But while everyone I say this to agrees with me, only a handful of organizations actually truly take the time to understand and dissect what that true great experience means for their customers, and then embarks on the journey of transformation to make that happen, right? So don't go with what you perceive as a great customer experience. Dissect what your customers tell you and believe is a great experience. Lastly, my third takeaway, I truly believe that the power of gig workforce today is still very largely under-leveraged. I believe it has the ability and the scalability to do things that call centers simply aren't built to do, right? And so if we're not listening to the workforce and what the economy is telling us, then we continue to find ourselves having conversations around increasing wage rates, balance of quality of life between work and home, scarcity for the right talent, finding it harder to find and then train and deploy the right talent, right? So take a very serious, conscientious look at the gig workforce and where it can help kind of amplify what you're already doing within your contact center and with automation. I'd say those would be my three takeaways, Chad.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you quantifying that. And I know, Susan Alverson, you asked a question a lot earlier in the conversation on that third point of gig. And is the gig economy taking off in other areas of the world outside of North America? And what I interpret that is, are there, when you look at EMA, Asia Pac, or other parts of the world, are those brands that work in country leveraging gig? Because I know gig is a global workforce, but as far as the brands outside the US, is that something you see in adoption?
Absolutely. So gig as a concept for where you can deploy it is already global. We have gig experts across the entire globe. It is getting more pervasive in a lot of countries in EMEA and APAC, so much so that a lot of the governments are looking at how do you enable that type of workforce a little better. Now, there's going to be, with just like with any kind of evolution, there will be push and pull on how they get deployed in each of these regions. But just know that it's already global. It's not just a US based phenomenon.
And that means brands, non-US brands, are adopting a gig concept and leveraging that. Correct?
Both non-US brands are leveraging and adopting it, and US based brands are leveraging the power of the gig workforce across the globe. So both ways.
Yeah, and Heidi Solomon, thank you for your participation, Heidi. You'd asked a question earlier too, and I'm trying to get to all the questions that are coming in to me. But Heidi, you'd asked earlier, how do you see generative AI being expanded to address more complex language support outside of English? I thought that was an interesting question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So generative AI is already available in a myriad of languages. I wish I had the entirety of the list in front of me right now. But if you go and take a look at Bard or ChatGPT, there's already a whole host of international languages that it's able to provide support for, right? If you think about it, translation services have been around forever. They have been evolving, getting better. Generative AI is just accelerating that, just like it is everything else. So the natural language component of it already stretches far beyond just the English language.
Yeah. And audience and microphone, I don't know if you're still on, and I hope everyone can see the questions or some of the questions in the Q&A box. This is where you can put your comments to this conversation. Hopefully, Michael, you've been very active with the number of comments in there. Thank you. I hope everyone in the audience can see some of my comments there and have access to that. As we're moving forward here quickly, though, I think a lot of time about striking the right balance. And I had said earlier in my comments that I feel, it's not a one and done or one fits all, but really striking that balance between leveraging technology, Sid, like generative AI, and maintaining the human touch and customer interaction. So, it's a bit of a forefront. We're all learning and growing together in this, but do you have any comments specific that you may want to share with the audience about maintaining that human touch and customer interactions with some of the developing stuff happening in generative AI?
Yeah, I love that question, Chad. Thank you. And I think you said it when you set up the question itself, right? There is no one size fits all when it comes to this type of solution. It is what your customers need and where you are with your journey. So if you think back about that transformative chart I showed you, it's take things, I would say, in bite-sized samples, identify the right types of intents and sub-intents you want to start with, and grow from there, right? Test in those small bite-sized chunks so you understand and you're constantly gathering feedback about what's working for your customers, what's not working, what else they would like to see. Generative AI can give you a lot of that intelligence, and then you scale from there onwards, right? So I'd say understand that it's not a one size fits all from a solution perspective or from a timeline perspective, And if you have the ability to do so, carve out bite-sized pieces first, and then work, incrementally add on top of them to get to the end state desired.
I'm thinking about in our community, I've heard Sid, I'm going to try to tackle some of these individual things. I've heard so many comments and yay and nay about, let's take gig as an example. And, reaction, positive, negative, or anything else in between. Today, as a global workforce or economy, gig would probably represent, I'm guessing, what, 10, 15% of total customer interaction, contact support? Is it lower, higher today?
It's probably in that range, Chad. I don't think you're off by much.
Okay.
Give or take a few
And
percentage points.
speculating, and again, there's lots of opinions out there, but if we were to have this conversation in 5 years, Sid, where do you think that's going to be from a mix, that 10 to 15%?
Yeah,
From a
that's great. What
distributed
I think
gig
will happen.
leveraging.
Yeah, what I think will happen is, right, gig will get to a point where it's able to handle 40, 50%, maybe even a little bit more in its state of maturity. But what will happen is generative AI will come in, will learn from what gig is handling, and generative AI over time will take more. So in the near term, it can go up to 40, 60%. But in the long term that you're looking at, it's probably going to settle somewhere at 20, 25%.
We could get into all sorts of commentary and thoughts about generative AI, chat GPT, and adoption, and where people are looking and considering, depending on the verticals, depending on various situations. I guess I want to leave on this question to you, because our time is always goes so fast, Sid. If in this entire conversation you just had, and you did a great job of illustrating some of the fact-based points that you wanted to share in today's discussion, what keeps you up at night about this? What is a concern for you? Is it a technology thing, an adoption thing, or something else in between? But what would be your concern in the conversation we've had?
That's a good question, Chad. And I'll answer it from also the perspective that I've been hearing from a lot of other customers and what keeps them up with this, with generative AI, right? What I hear is untethered, unfiltered, open communication on how it can influence, brands and enterprise experiences without necessarily without necessarily the support organization being able to control what should and should not be passed as information through generative AI. Right now, you can control and you can model generative AI on how it delivers information if they're using generative AI after they've reached some touch point within your organization. But you can't necessarily control what generative AI says and does in the broader scheme of just open AI. And I'll give you a real life example. One of the I was evaluating if I should go buy the new Chromecast device and switch over from my Alexa. So one of the things I tested with Bard was, hey, what's the differences between these two devices? It gave me information saying that the Chromecast doesn't come with a remote and has voice recognition, which clearly the Chromecast does. Now, for an average consumer, that would have deterred me from going to a product that I had desired to something else, right? So that type of unstructured conversation in the open is kind of what I think we still don't have the ability to wrap our heads around.
And last question, I want to make sure I get this in there, and then we've got to wrap this up. And Lisa, as well, thank you for your comment here. Lisa sits on our board, and at the same point, like many of the brands in our community, Lisa's thought, and I tend to agree with her, is that her comment is around at the speed of which this is moving. And, how do practitioners like Lisa and many others in our community make smart choices about the right best platforms and partners? Like every other adoption curve, Lisa's saying that there will be early adopters on one end and wait and see on the other, which I completely agree. I hear that all the time. But the difference between the full adoption cycle will be shorter than the other technology. So more of a comment, more of a, when none of us have the magic crystal ball there, But I do think that's a common point that I seem to echo Lisa's comments. I don't know if you have a reaction to that.
No, I agree. On some of it, we don't know what we don't know, but I'd say find a partner that's already on the journey and that can help you bring collective intelligence that they are seeing and know across multiple instances.
And I would say, okay, we're going to wrap up now, but team, our audience, I would say this is not a one and done conversation. This is going to be a continuation of many conversations and many efforts together as a community. The good news is you don't have to go at this alone. You're surrounded with many other peers that are trying to learn and share and grow together in this conversation. Sid, I'd like to compliment you and say thank you for coming out to our community today, sharing in this very important topic. Also, Sid, I like the charts and the graphs you put out there. I found them very valuable. Audience, for your registration today, you will get a copy of today's slides. I believe there's a recording you can download and listen to or share within your audience members. But at the end of the day, Sid, thank you for a very thoughtful and provoking conversation, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the near future. So on behalf of myself, Chad, and everyone else, we've got to wrap up here, but have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for your listenership. We'll see you at the next session. Thank you, Sid.